Hey there guys, TC Mabe. I wanted to continue on with our Ninja Bear Studio partner videos, and in this particular video we're going to be creating a new sword and a new shield. So what I've done is in my project I've created under the content folder, I created two new folders, one called weapons and under that one called melee. And then also I imported some resources, so I have fantasy swords and fantasy war shields. For this tutorial you can use whatever sword or shield that you have in your library. But what I want to do is go in here into the melee portion of this folder, and I'm going to right click and say that I want to get a new blueprint class. And under all classes, what you're looking for is one that derives from Ninja Combat Weapon Actor, and you'll hit select. And I'm just going to call this base underscore melee underscore weapon, and we're going to set our primary values on this base weapon class, and then we'll create children from that for our sword and our shield. This is an easy way that if you ever want to do a bunch of an item, you create a parent and then create children from that. And that way, if you have to make a change that affects all of the things, you can just go to one spot and change it, so instead of having to go to individual blueprints. So in here, what we want to do in our base melee weapon, we're going to need a static mesh to represent our items. So we're going to go up to components and hit add and just type in stat, and you'll see static mesh down here at the bottom. The static mesh, I'm going to change its name to weapon mesh, just so we know that that's what that's for. And while the weapon mesh is highlighted, if we come over here to the right hand side, you can just type in collision, and it'll pull up our collision presets. What we want to do is we want to say this is going to be custom. We want this to be query only, no physics collision, world static, and under the collision responses, we just want to overlap everything. Make sure all those boxes are checked and hit compile. Also in here, what we want to do is, since this is derived from the Ninja Combat Weapon Actor, you will also find that there is an interface in here, an interface section. And under interfaces for the melee interface, there's a function here called Get Melee Mesh. We want to double left click on that. It'll pop up that function. And then we want to pull the melee mesh, or weapon mesh rather, onto this node here, so that's identified there. All right, so quick recap. We created a child of Ninja Combat Weapon Actor. Based on that class, we pulled in a static mesh component called Weapon Mesh and turned on the function for our Get Melee Mesh that points to that weapon mesh, and also changed our collision parameters to basically overlap everything as a world static query only object. Now that we have that done, we can go ahead and make sure that it's saved and close our base melee weapon. We're going to right click on this and say create child blueprint class. So now I'm going to put in a base underscore melee underscore sword. And now what we can do is save that and go into that base melee sword. And again, I added a pack for mine, so I can go to the weapon mesh for the static mesh and just type in sword. And I'm just going to grab this small sword 01 from that pack. And if I go to viewport and zoom in, I should be able to see that I have a sword there. Okay. Compile this and save it. And in that should be all we need to do now, because this is already set up with all the other settings. So we just needed to add the static mesh to that. You can see it again, open full blueprint editor. We just needed to add this in here, and there shouldn't be anything else required. And then what we can do is we're going to have to add a couple of sockets to our character to be able to hold this weapon. And then after we define the socket, we're going to point that to our manager on here as well. So we're going to go and get our third person character. We're going to locate that. In our third person character blueprint, we are going to hit the mesh button, or select the mesh. That'll bring us our skeletal mesh asset, which we can search for in the browser. That'll take us to the folder where we can find our skeleton. If we double left click on our skeleton, our right hand is going to be holding a sword and our left hand is going to be holding a shield. So we want the lower part of this right hand here, and this is going to be called hand underscore R, which is right here. You can see it pops up a socket. I'm going to right click and say add socket. And instead of calling this hand R socket, I'm going to call this RH for right hand underscore melee. If you wanted to, you could also call it weapon. Right hand melee weapon. And if you want to place this socket, what you can do is right click on this and say add preview asset. And I'm going to go up here and type in sword and grab that sword number 1. Now I can see that my melee weapon, is not in the right spot, so I can click the select and translate objects, slide that socket down until it's underneath the hand, and it looks something like this. Might still be a little high, so we can drag it up into there. And you can go and tweak this however you want to with going and adjusting the different parameters to it. I'm gonna leave mine like that. Good enough for what we're trying to accomplish here. If you want to change how hard it is or how many clicks that moves, you can also adjust these up here, change your grid snap sizes and also your scale snapping and all that. You can adjust those to get a finer control over it. But now we have that socket defined. Remember, it's RH melee weapon. If you think you'll forget it, you can right click on here and say copy. Or you can also right click while it's still in socket mode and just say copy selected sockets. That'll give you the name of it as well. And in our third person character, we have a thing called the combat weapon manager. And we have a default weapon class and a socket map for it. So we go to default weapon class, click on this plus button, and we should have a base melee sword. And for the socket mapping, we want to take the base melee sword and map its name to that socket name. So the thing I did when I copied the object, you don't want to do that. You want to do RH underscore melee underscore weapon. I'll just type it in. RH underscore melee underscore weapon should match our naming on the other one. And then for our Ninja Combat Manager, we want to go in here and there's a function under the interfaces here for getting the combat mesh. So we double click that and pull this up. And then that's going to be the mesh of our character. It's going to get returned to this object right here. And compile and save that. Okay, now that we've saved everything here, we can go to third person and hit start. And if we pan around, I'll hit the F11 button to zoom this in, but we'll see that our character is now holding that sword. And if we want to go ahead and add a shield, basically the same thing. We're going to come down to the melee section here. We're going to right click on this and say create child blueprint class. I want to call this base underscore melee underscore shield. And all I have to do now is just double click, go in here. Under that mesh, we're going to go and look for a shield. I'll just grab the ancient Greek shield. Looks fine. Compile that. I'm going to go back into my character. Under my combat weapon manager, I'm going to add another default weapon class in here. And I'm going to pick my shield. And under the weapon socket mapping, I'm going to pick my shield again. I need to go create a socket for this to be on, so let me compile that for a second, save it. I'm going to go to my mesh, find my skeleton, go to my hand L, add socket called, I'm going to rename this here, add socket called LH underscore, and we called this melee underscore weapon. So if I go back into here and back to the weapon manager, this is called LH underscore melee underscore weapon. And what that should do is, because I've created the two melee objects here and I've defined them in the manager, I should have them both equipped when I hit start. And lo and behold, I have a sword and a shield. Now, if you needed to worry about the placement of this a little bit, see how the shield's kind of like upside down and kind of bent around? If you want to, when you're messing around with this, I'm going to hit F11 again, and I'll scroll this window a little bit. I want to hit F8 because I'm still running. We click on that shield, and then at runtime, you can actually go in here and you can adjust the properties of this. So I can bend this out some. Kind of glance around, look at it here. Back up. I put myself on the thing there. But you can look at that and see, say it's still kind of close. So we can grab it this way and push it out a little bit. And then you can see here there's a bar for that. So it would actually go down there in the hand, which would be like that. It's hard to see this, but you can see there's a little like place where the hand's at. And then if you don't like the pitch of it, yeah, you can still bend it out some. So you could take this again, change it back to this tool, and you can bend it out a little if you wanted to. I don't know if that's going to look okay when I'm running. It might need to be half of that. But now I can hit F8 again, and it looks a little bit better. And when I run, it looks like it's probably okay. So that's a quick way to adjust those. And when you adjust them using the F8 thing there at runtime, that should stick. Go back to P again. Okay, so it didn't stick in there, but we could get that value and we could pass it on back to that socket. If I go back out to the character mesh, find that and go to my skeleton, I can go over here to the melee weapon, add preview asset, and go ahead and get that ancient Greek shield in there. And then, like I said, you just look at it and see that it's going to have to come out a little bit. It's a little close to the body. Add these sockets here. Pull it up this way. And just drag it until it's like down here where the thumbs would be. Be about like that. Okay, we can mess around with that later if you want to. And again, just hit and play now. It's actually going to preserve that value. I could pitch that out a little bit more. But if you hit F8 and zoom in on this, you can see the hand's in a better placement there. Okay. Again, my name's TC, and TC Mabe. I'm just doing these Ninja Bear Studios videos. In the next video, what we'll do is we'll actually enable the traces on this and use it to do damage and hit things. Okay? See you in a future video. You guys have a safe night, and we'll talk to you soon.